We are gathered here to oppose Common Core as it was adopted throughout the state of Mississippi. We have been working with a number of groups throughout the state and individuals, just concerned parents and grandparents, and teachers. Some teachers have been involved in this. Yesterday, we found out from the superintendent of the Petal School District that if a teacher is opposed to Common Core and would speak out about it, that he would happily help them find another job outside of the Petal School District. We are very concerned about that kind of blocking of freedom of speech in this country, and we're certainly worried about it in Mississippi, because we should need to be teaching our children that what they learn and what they believe is worth saying. I thank everybody who braved the cold temperatures this morning and came out. We just concluded a rally over at the farmers market to give information about what we've learned about Common Core. It certainly was not comprehensive what we covered this morning, but it was a taste of what we are learning about Common Core. As we have been working with individuals, and particularly our state senators, there are more red flags that keep arising in front of our faces. And so we are asking the legislature to consider our views, consider what we have learned, because we have got documentation about what we've learned, and what we were sold to adopt by the Mississippi Department of Education is not what we want for school children in Mississippi going forward. At the end of the last legislative session, a number of us were gathered at the room 113 downstairs, talking about some of the things that we see coming forward and what we were going to be concerned about. Common Core rose to the top of the list. So we started our search, we started gathering information, and we started talking to people who would actually have more information, more knowledge about it that could add to the conversation. We have had 2 legislators for sure that have been driving all over this state, from the top to the bottom, from the east to the west, to talk to people about Common Core and parents. So we are asking the legislature to listen to what we have to say and reconsider what was adopted by the Mississippi Department of Education on June 24th and 25th in 2010. By the minutes of that meeting, it appears that the Mississippi Department of Education did not have a real review of what the Common Core standards were going to say and what were going to be presented to our school children. We are now beginning to learn this, and we do not like what we see. We also see that Common Core is a top-down from the United States federal government as taking over public education. It also will eliminate or greatly reduce school choice. I have a few people who will offer us some insight about this. One is Roy Nicholson. He is the immediate past chairman of the Mississippi Tea Party. He's an avid follower of history. He wants to understand, and he provides us with great information about where we're coming from and why we believe so strongly that education should be in the hands of those people who receive it, the parents who teach our children. Roy.
Thank you, Laura. Note to the press, I have a lot of references from historical that was in a previous speech. I have copies of that and can make that available to you if you want all those references. You know, back in 1776, our founding fathers wrote a very radical, world-changing document. It was called the Declaration of Independence. And in that, they claimed that God had given us unalienable rights, among which were life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that governments were instituted among men to secure those rights, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Those sounded radical, and to us they sound like brand new, but they were not. Those thoughts began all the way back with Plato, through the Roman Empire, up through the Middle Ages. Great thinkers were considering the nature of man and the nature of society and government, and they were coming to the conclusions that the individuals are sovereign and that there is a God who has given both rights and responsibilities. One of the great men that wrote just before the time of our founding fathers, a guy named John Locke. And our founding fathers based a whole lot of what they said on his writing. And when they wrote those famous words, they were not writing something new or in some philosophical vacuum. They were simply standing on top of the shoulders of giants, and they were coalescing and speaking with greater clarity than ever before the thoughts and the words that were reshaping the whole world and the thoughts of men. John Locke, I want to give you a little bit of what he said. He said, the power then that parents have over their children arises from that duty which is incumbent upon them to take care of their offspring during the imperfect state of childhood, to inform the mind and govern the actions of the yet ignorant, till reason shall take its place and ease them of that trouble. The parents are bound to this, for God has given man an understanding to direct his actions, having allowed him a freedom of will and liberty of acting as properly belonging thereunto within the bounds of the law he is under. He said many other things, but I want to read to you his conclusion. The nourishment and education of their children is a charge so incumbent on parents for their children's good that nothing can absolve them from taking care of it. Locke and the founding fathers considered that sacred responsibility of the parents as a God-given responsibility as fundamental with individual sovereignty, the freedom of thought and speech, and all the other great freedoms and ideas that are enshrined in the Declaration and in our Constitution. That responsibility to educate our children, whether we have placed it in the hands by consent and by an endowment of power to our Department of Education, we are still in charge of our children. They are ours. They are not the state's. They are not the elite educationists under their control. The Department of Education must be under the control of the people of Mississippi. And we have been calling upon our governor. We thank God for his executive order, calling the legislature to take note and be ready to act. We thank God for the senators and representatives that we have today that are taking this issue seriously and investigating what Common Core really is and what its real agenda is. And we are calling on them to take up with us the rejection of the agenda and the methods and the purposes of Common Core, and to completely ban the implementation of it within our states, and to guide the Department of Education back in to obedient servant position of the people of Mississippi, instead of thinking that it has some divine right of control over our children's education. We stand against that. We're glad, and we thank the governor for what he has done and for these legislators, and we're now calling on the rest of this great house to stand up against what will actually reduce the quality of education in Mississippi instead of raising it higher, and which, as you'll hear one of our senators say, it strips control of the education of our children out of the hands of the Department of out of the hand of the local school board, and takes control of the school classroom out of the hands of the teacher, and all of it out of the hands of parents. So we want to ask the legislature to stand with us and stop the implementation of Common Core. Thank you.
Senator Angela Hill is one who has been taking the baton and running with it. She's done more in terms of research in the members of this legislature to understand what Common Core means to us as children, for our children. She's a former educator, a highly respected teacher, and she has come forward to give us information about how Common Core specifically will endanger the quality of education in Mississippi. Senator Angela Hill.
Thank you so much for coming out on this cold day. As a teacher, a former teacher, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a citizen, as one who believes in the separation of powers, one who believes in the document that I swore an oath to when I took this office, I believe that Common Core is contrary to the productivity of all the aforementioned things and persons. Common Core was basically sold to the American people as a internationally benchmarked, internationally competitive program that would allow our kids to rise to the level of competition with countries like Singapore and Japan in math. This has basically been unraveled to be false. I have a document in front of me that was published by PARC, Model Content Framework for Mathematics, November 2012, and it talks about what the college and career readiness of Common Core really means. The document says, in the best view, the college and career ready line in the standards can be seen as a milepost, not a finish line. It is a line best crossed with velocity. In particular, students who wish to pursue science, technology, engineering, or mathematics majors, or who wish to do college-level work in high school, such as advanced placement or international baccalaureate courses, must progress well beyond the initial threshold of college and career readiness as defined by the standards. You figure out what that means. It means college readiness is not really college readiness. Does it not? Right. Jason Zimba, who is the lead mathematics writer for Common Core, is on video. You can go out there and Google his video. At a Massachusetts Board of Education meeting, he was questioned by Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who is one of the foremost English language arts content and standards experts in the country, who refused to sign her name off on the Common Core Validation Committee. Sandra Stotsky demanded a hearing before the Massachusetts Board of Education when Massachusetts was considering dumping their standards that even the Fordham Institute considered much better than Common Core to compete for that federal money. She questioned Jason Zimba, lead mathematics writer, about the mathematics content and the lack of STEM pathway and the lack of STEM content, and Jason Zimba is admittedly on the video saying that the standards are minimal at best, that they prepare a student for a non-selective college or a community college, the colleges that most kids go to, but not the colleges that most parents aspire for them to go to. An Associated Press article came out that said only 1,000 kids in Mississippi took calculus as seniors in high school. Well, that's shameful. But this writes those 1,000 kids off and those other ones who might aspire to go into a STEM career, and basically says you're going to have to figure out how to get it on your own because Common Core stops after Algebra 2. Even the Fordham Institute, who evaluated Mississippi's math standards and was paid by the Bill Gates Foundation to evaluate state standards against Common Core, gave Mississippi's math standards a C, which is mediocre or average. Fordham's comment was Mississippi's math frameworks had good STEM content. I've got the paperwork, I can show it to you. So we've abandoned a framework with STEM content for one that basically lacks frameworks and standards for pre-calculus and calculus. It ends after Algebra 2. There were intentions by some on the validation committee, including Dr. James Milgram from Stanford, that this be included in the math frameworks. It was called a third pathway, but for some reason that they are yet to know, the third pathway was never written. So what we have been sold as internationally competitive, internationally benchmarked, will allow our kids to compete in the global economy. PARC tells you that it's minimal, that if your child wants to take AP, if your child wants a STEM career, they're going to have to go far and above Common Core math standards. Don't take my word for it. This is PARC, the testing consortium that is paid for and funded by the Federal Department of Education, in their own words. Thank you very much.
We were hoping to have Senator Michael Watson come and address us today. I don't see him in the crowd right now, but I want you all to know that we have had members of the community, the Christian Action Commission, to come forward with us and stand with us and continue to study what Common Core will do. It falls short of upholding American values. I would like to read a little bit of what they've said. This comes from an article that was written by Rob Chambers, a consultant for the Christian Action Commission. And this is his assessment. If a state did not win the grant, that the state would still be committed to U.S. Department of Education policies in the agreement. Mississippi did not receive any Race to the Top grants, but the board has committed the Mississippi federally conditioned standards and more. These standards do not speak to all children in that it has race-based objectives. The Mississippi Department of Education has said, I believe that if we raise expectations, our students and educators will rise to meet those expectations. If this statement is true, then why is the MDE, the Mississippi Department of Education, expecting less of certain racial subgroups in their annual measurement objectives? At a bare minimum, it is morally demeaning and degrading to suggest that it will take 12 more years on the top of the past 12 years unfailed No Child Left Behind standards for the lowest race-based subgroup to reach the equivalent of another. Based on the MDE's actions, it follows that they believe it will take nearly a quarter century for the lowest race-based subgroup to reach the level of the highest. This is an unjust and immoral attack on a student's psyche. We particularly are concerned about not looking at all children and tailoring education as needs to be in the classroom. That means that the teacher must take control of her classroom, his classroom. They need to be the person who makes the decision about whether or not they're reaching all their students. But Common Core says 85% of the content has to be included in their copyrighted curriculum, their copyrighted standards, and only about 15% beyond that can be taken up and given to by the teachers at their discretion. This is a serious problem. We are very much concerned about Common Core because it takes the control away from the teacher, away from parents, away from the schools, away from the school districts. They are the ones who are supposed to have control of our children's education. I have a personal friend who is an educator, and he assesses educational programs all over the world. His name is Hans Wackemacher. He goes all over the world interviewing and talking to and assessing school programs, educational programs. He told me personally that taking control of education away from local communities is a serious problem and should be only considered under the most extreme conditions. We don't have those extreme conditions. We have educational processes, we have educational standards already in effect in Mississippi that don't need to be compromised by Common Core. I'll take questions. Yes.
I would like to know how the poorest children in Mississippi are going to be able to afford tutors so that they can reach the American dream and have a STEM career like the wealthier students would be able to afford.
The question is how poor students are going to be able to get STEM careers if they don't have the money to advance beyond these smaller and less effective STEM presentations. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. I don't know. It doesn't appear to me with Common Core that we're going to be able to meet those needs through the public process. And so therefore, we will be leaving those children out. And there are many bright children who are poor, a lower socioeconomic group, who will not have the resources in order to get that help.
So what do you want to see in place of Common Core?
Senator Hill has done extensive research about what we can do. And she has a couple of bills that she's going to present in the Senate, she's filing this year, that will stop Common Core and provide adequate educational standards and curriculum. These are from Senator Hill. Tell me where your standards come from.
There were 5 or 6 states that the Fordham Institute labeled as higher and better standards than Common Core. Mississippi, if Mississippi is serious about competitiveness, about raising the bar in education, then Mississippi should take some of those state standards that were even deemed by Fordham to be stronger and better than Common Core, and we should adopt some of those standards that have already worked in other states and proven to be exemplary. California is the gold standard in math. We have ELA standards in Texas, Georgia, Massachusetts that have proven to be very, very good standards, have been evaluated as being very good standards. Those are all in the public domain. They're government documents. We can adopt those standards for free. We can even look at tests that those states had implemented. There's many avenues that we can look at. We don't have to go back to Mississippi standards, which were a C as far as Fordham was concerned, or average, even though Fordham was being paid by the Bill Gates Foundation, who was certainly leaning and is paid every educational stakeholder in this country to promote Common Core standards. So there are exemplary state standards out there. If Mississippi truly wants to raise the bar, they're out there. All we have to do is adopt them.
But those are those just, those standards are just kind of Common Core plus. I mean, they're not called Common Core, but it's the same principle that you add on to those.
Those standards were adopted prior to Common Core in those states. Those standards actually have STEM content in the mathematics.
So you need to bring things that Common Core.
Pardon?
Things that says Common Core.
I don't care what it says, as long as it prepares a student to succeed in college and to have STEM content. Massachusetts' prior standards are not Common Core standards. Texas did not adopt Common Core. They still have control of their standards in that state. There's several states that did retain control. Minnesota still has their own mathematics standards that they had certified by one of their institutions of higher learning as college and career ready. Mississippi could take its own set of standards that we had before. We could revise those standards. We could have an institution of higher learning in Mississippi with content experts in the fields of language arts and mathematics actually certify those standards as college and career ready. There's many options that we can take besides the federal option.
One of the other things that I did not mention that I should mention is that Mississippi has been working for over 6 years to improve school choice for parents and students. Last year, after the 6th year, we finally gotten a charter school bill that is perhaps workable to create charter schools in Mississippi. Charter schools is one link in the chain to bringing school choice to Mississippi. If we adopt Common Core as it's written, and because it's copyrighted, that same curriculum, standards and curriculum, has to be taught in every school venue. So we will essentially wipe out school choice and various ideas that are applicable to the student. Every homeschooler will have to do it, every public school, every private school. This is a serious problem when we cannot make choices that actually speak to the needs of the children. Any other questions?
Gulfport, Mississippi's already implemented Common Core. How are their tests doing? How are those students doing on their exams?
Yesterday, I came across an article that talks about the examinations, the assessments that Gulfport has done. Gulfport has been teaching through Common Core for 4 years. Their test scores are plummeting. They are worse than they were before Common Core was initiated. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you.
Oh.